You're listening to the 14th Source for all geeky and nerdy news and discussion, which means that you're listening to a podcast.
For all intents and purposes.
I am D. Bethel.
And I'm Andrew Asplund.
And we are your two overeducated, codependent nerd hosts, bringing you the things that we like to talk about, but filtered through inquisitive and critical lenses. In the episode for Friday, August 4th, 2023. Oof. A mere 16 days away, Andrew, from H.P. Lovecraft's birthday. But we don't celebrate racists here. We celebrate time-traveling immortals. It's so 16 days away from, of course, the birthday of Sylvester McCoy.
Yeah, and Sophie Aldred and other people. Al Roker.
Mm-hmm. And the guy that played the Master, whose name I can't remember for some reason. Anthony Ainley. Anthony Ainley. Sorry,
Anthony Ainley. Yeah, I was going to say Anthony Delgado, and I'm like, nope, that's not a real person.
Oh, I'm sure it's a real person somewhere.
Oh yeah, there's somewhere. Yeah, yeah. So it's a fancy day, but that's 14 days. That's 16 days away, so let's not worry about that yet.
It's August though, and the year is going by too quickly.
Oh.
So quickly, in fact, we forgot to do an episode last week. Our bad.
Well, okay, so we didn't forget. You remembered, but you were out of town, and you said, "Hey, Andrew, you should do this thing. Maybe see if a friend of the show wants to do an episode." And I'm like, "Okay," and then I did.
Friend of the show. Well, I think also friend of the show is out of the country.
Well, one friend of the show is definitely out of the country.
We have many. We got a lot of friends of the show.
We have at least two friends of the show.
We have so many friends of the show. We're so cool. Yeah. And in your defense, it was kind of an impromptu travel plan on my part, and I took advantage of it. So not the most professional thing, but we're here now. We are here to entertain and educate and discuss. So with that in mind, go ahead.
I'm going to take a minute to talk about something personal that happened to me. So this is it's August, and this week actually in Seattle we had one of our, once every 3 months thing you have to vote. There's a lot of voting to be done in Seattle. Arguably excessive amount, right? I think
specifically Seattle, or is this a Washington thing?
It's Seattle. It's Seattle, King County, Washington. It's a little bit of all of it, but yeah, I think there's like 4 times I have to vote every year, and you're just kind of like, this is a bit much. Anyway, it's a
bit too much democracy for me right now.
The primary for the 2023 election in Washington, and I went to vote. And this was an interesting cycle. My city council person, who's kind of notorious.
I've heard stories.
She's kind of a notorious socialist that makes all the news. Anyway, she said she wasn't going to run anymore. So it was kind of an open position. There's a lot of different candidates. I actually met a candidate. My partner met a candidate. We both met a candidate on the same night at different places.
I was going to say.
It was actually really interesting. Like, we're both like, hey, I'm talking to someone running for city council. And he's like, oh, so am I.
Did you guys meet different people?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Wild, right?
Different candidates.
Of like the 10. And when we bust open our ballots ready to vote, and we look, and we are suddenly in a different city council district.
Wait, okay.
And I was like, what? How is it that I went from District 3 to District 2? And this is actually something that anyone who really gets bored can figure out roughly where I live. Because if you look like, hey, we changed the city council districts. And if you now look at the new map of Seattle city council districts, District 2 has this very weird appendage that kind of goes north into what was formerly District 3. And guess what? I live in that weird appendage. And it's this thing where, we'll do the census. We discovered that the districts were not, they didn't have equal representation of people, so we had to resize it. But it is the most gerrymandered thing I've ever personally been part of. To just seeing like, oh, wow, there's this little chunk now that like if I go 2 blocks to the north, east, or west, it's a different district. In fact, to the north and to the east is my old district, and to the west is always the other district, I think District 1. So it's this idea that suddenly there's just this little like 4-block tentacle that comes out from District 2 and has absorbed me. And it's weird because it's like, wow, I got, for lack of a better word, I got gerrymandered.
Yeah, not to quote Parks and Rec, but damn it, Jerry.
So yeah, I just wanted to complain about that. We don't normally talk about all sorts of political stuff that often, but this is a personal political thing. And it was really sad.
We don't talk about personal politics that often, yes.
It was very sad because I was hoping I would get to vote for this guy I met at a bar. Really nice guy.
So what you're saying is meet and greets work.
I mean, he like... for me, it really was. Of course, he's not going to win because of the 10 people.
Because the people he met aren't going to be able to vote for him.
Right. He ended up spending all his effort campaigning with people that live in a different district. No, it's actually because really the way our primaries work is it's usually 2 candidates. One gets sponsored by kind of like the city chamber of commerce, and the other one gets sponsored by the kind of the local. Leftist newspaper type of thing.
Right.
And those are the 2 that usually end up winning the primary. So he wasn't either of those. So
no.
And he even said, like, yeah, don't vote for me, vote for this other person. Well, I'm
glad
vote for
your
either.
County and city are continuing the storyline of Game of Thrones, apparently. Who knows what's going to happen next? It's all a bloodbath.
Yeah. So anyway, that was a fun story about getting gerrymandered.
Not as geeky as we would hope, but as 2 geeks or nerds, I'm sure you occupied the rest of your time by doing something nerdy or geeky during the week. Which leads us to what we're going to talk about this week, dear listeners, our weeks in geek. And weeks, in this case, is plural. So, Andrew, if you don't mind starting, what was your week in geek? Like, honestly, if you have listened to the past couple episodes, what has your month in geek been like?
I think I mentioned it in passing in the previous episode, or maybe it was 2 episodes ago, that I'd started playing a new game. I've been fishing, Dan.
Yes.
I've been fishing. I've actually there's 2 different fishings I've been doing. I'm going to focus on one of them. Because this is there was a big Steam sale earlier, and this is kind of the month where a bunch of people picked up. I mean, there were a lot of magazines and websites that recommended, hey, you should get these 2 games on the Steam sale. One was Dredge, and the other was Dave the Diver. And so I picked them both up, and I want to focus on Dredge because it was the first one I played, and it's one that I also suspect more so than Dave the Diver, that Dredge is one that I think is I think Dan would like it. That's what I'll say. Thematically, it's a game. Dredge it's a game. It was released earlier this year, I believe. And conceptually, it kind of opens with you. I think it's like you crash your boat into at sea. You're at sea. You crash your boat into like some rocks. You wake up in this small village, and they're like, "Hey, we saved you. Your boat's gone, but hey, we got this other boat you can use, by the way, and we want to give it to you. Just go fishing for us." And so you go out and catch fish, but it has a very, kind of, for lack of a better word, a very Lovecraftian theme where you're fishing, but it's kind of got that, that early 20th century rustic, Northeast, New England fishing kind of town.
Right.
And more importantly, as you start fishing, you start discovering some weird ass fish. These are like something out of a Lovecraft story. And they even say, like, hey, yeah, where you're fishing, don't stay out late at night. You should come back to town before the sun sets. And of course, as you play and you start staying out late at night, you start seeing like, oh wow, things are a bit, weird at night. Kind of sea monsters, if you will. It's actually what's weird to me is it's a fishing game, and I say it's Lovecraftian, and it is. It is very much like they know what they're doing. But at the same time, it makes me realize how much just fishing is horrifying. Like the being out to sea, the like there's nothing around, it's dark, you don't know what's there, and the kind of like the idea that and we all see like what comes out of the ocean. Even in real life, there's some weird things in the water. As I think I've said when we talked to when I've said to a lot of people in discussion specifically about Rich Boy Submarine, the ocean is this thing that wakes up every morning with one thing on the to-do list, and that is to kill you.
Right.
And this game really just gives that and adds that kind of cosmic horror of like, oh boy, what are these? I will say like. The game it's got an interesting art style. I mean, the core game loop is you go out, catch fish, you sell fish, you make money, improve your boat, catch more fish. That is the core game loop. But then there's a story that you discover where like, hey, you find this collector on an island near the town, the village that you started in. And the people they have their little stories you're doing, but this collector's like, hey, I want you to collect these 5 important relics for me from around the area. And that's where it really starts to kind of like, get weird. Because, that drives you out to different locations where you see more weirdness, more sea monsters, more scary things.
Right.
I think at one point, I will say this is a little bit of a spoiler, not a story spoiler, but like a content spoiler. So if you don't want to know, go plug your ears. But like pretty early on, if you're sailing around at night, you will sometimes see in the distance like what looks like your own fishing boat kind of sailing around.
Oh shit!
And for the longest time, I thought it was just like a mind trick. It was just like until I got my boat fast enough that I was like I can catch up to it. So I start sailing towards it, and it starts coming towards me. I'm like, oh, this is weird. I didn't think this could. I thought it would just like vanish. By the time you got close to it, like it was just a mirage.
Right.
And sure as shit, it was a giant anglerfish that then tried to eat me. And I was like, wow,
that's
that
incredible.
was kind of cool, right? Like the idea that, it's one of the gimmicks is you see these little fake boats out, but it's not actually fake boats, it's an anglerfish. The game was just, it's that weird thing of how a game about fishing can incorporate there's some kind of like cosmic sorcery, there's weird relics, this kind of stuff, and how that just fits in so perfectly with I'm fishing.
Right.
I mean,
right. Yeah.
I'm surprised that Lovecraft didn't write more books about fucking fishermen.
What I love seeing with games now is that I feel like a lot of them are catching on to kind of what Lovecraftian horror actually is, which is more cerebral, more terror-based, rather than just tentacles and aliens, right? And what I like about Dredge is like the Lovecraftian aspect is a slow reveal, so to speak, right? You get there pretty quickly, but it starts as a game about fishing, right? There's some questionable like mystery going on, but then like you said, you catch weird fish. I've seen a bit of gameplay online, but there's actually a lot of games out there right now doing some interesting stuff with that regard. And without saying too much, Andrew, I watched another playthrough of a demo that's on Steam called Home Safety Hotline. That does something it's more like an FMV kind of game, but it's not an FMV game. But it's definitely kind of like a non-linear style game that it's brilliant in how it unveils kind of a darker understory that's actually kind of driving the whole thing. Because the Home Safety Hotline is basically you just kind of like Papers, Please. You're the game Papers, Please. You play a person that's just manning a home safety hotline, and you get a phone call, and they give you the person on the line tells you, oh, this is what I'm seeing, and then you have a database that you go through. And like, oh, they have termites, right? And so then you say you have termites, and then you end the call, and then but then you get some calls that are like, what? And then you start getting entries in your database that are like, what? And it's just this beautiful kind of unrolling. That's kind of what the good Lovecraftian fiction is all about. Again, we don't want to sidestep the fact that Lovecraft was a racist and a horrible person in his views and beliefs. But what he did with fiction was that it's about people that seem rational slowly showing you how they are entering the world of the irrational. And in his case, it was through very antiquated diction and vocabulary, But what that did was it slowed down the reading experience, and so it slowly built to the terrifying aspects of it. And if video games have a leg up on anything, it's time. And if you can find the loops and find the gameplay that works to really kind of like introduce you to the basic mechanics of the game, and then use those things in new or interesting or surprising ways, it just hits and does everything that I think should be done or could be done best in Lovecraftian fiction. And it sounds like Dredge does that beautifully.
It does, and I will say that there's little things. There's kind of big moments. There is this main storyline that you follow that by the end of it, there I will say it's not. I don't think it's a secret. There are 2 endings to the game.
What?
And one of them hinges on kind of you. There's the one that is the obvious, just follow along, and then there's the one that hinges on you kind of figuring out there's something a little bit different going on. And I thought it was great. I really liked. I don't think I would have gotten the second ending without looking it up. I was like, I don't think I would have done the last action that I need to do, but I really enjoyed kind of the discovery of, by the end of it, like what was going on, what was the story about. Not like that there's a twist or anything. I mean, there's a twist, but just to have this kind of slow, like you said, the slow narrative of, you think you're just a guy who's fishing, and then you get some weird fish, and then some stuff gets weirder and weirder, and by the end, like, there's like really weird shit, but you've kind of like, oh, that's fine, and then it's like the final thing is like, and it's really weird,
and then like, unexplainable horrors. So were you able to save scum both endings, or? Yeah.
No, at the end, it actually tells you like, hey, this is the. No, it's not a choice, but at the end, when you get to the thing where they say, hey, after this is then the end is the, like, everything after this is unsavable, and it's just the last, like, minute of the game.
Point of no return.
Or 2 minutes. Yeah. But it's just that you have to do something different, I think, to get to the second ending. But you can even kind of unlock it part of the way, and you still have that thing where you can still choose to do either ending. You know? By what you decide to do. But like I said, I think and as a game, I will say that main game loop of here's a fishing game where basically you go out in your little boat and you catch fish. The big thing is it's like a lot of fishing games in other games, right? Like it's kind of like, push the button on your control, like find the spot where the fish are, hit the button to start fishing, and then there's a little thing where you like basically are pressing your controller button at the right time, like when the thing is in the certain zone. Although what I will say, they make it interesting that different types of fish have different kind of ways that you do the little mini game. It's not like for anyone that's played like Stardew Valley, all fishing is the same. Here it's like no, there are like 5 categories of fish that are all a little bit different. There's also dredging, where you're dredging for sunken ships and stuff, which is,
I would hope there's dredging.
Which is a similar kind of mini game, but it's a different mechanic. So it's not like you're just doing the same tap to the beat or whatever that you might do. So I like that. I thought that they kept it interesting. The idea that they keep giving you there's more stuff to unlock, right? You research upgrades for your fishing boat. You get at one point you can get a trawling net, so then you just drive around and catch fish in your net. You get you have different lights you can install, different engines. So there's like a game. There's a game there, right? While exploring this tale of cosmic horror and love and loss or whatever. I don't know, whatever you want to say.
It looks like this is the first game from the developer Black Salt Games, out of New Zealand.
Yeah, I think I believe it's their first game.
That's cool.
But it was just a solid all around. I know that they've they're doing some post release content. Added a photo mode, which I never really got into.
Right. Considering it's like an isometric view, if I remember correctly, right? Kind of a...
Well, when you go to photo mode, you can do all sorts of photoing. And there's a whole thing on like their Discord where people are just sharing photos they took. And I'm like, whatever.
And for those that are wondering, it looks like it is available for all major platforms, except for the Macintosh. So there you go. Yeah, I should get on this. I have at least 2 of those platforms.
and they have they've already kind of talked about their future. They're gonna have one more like free update kind of patch, and then they do expect to do DLC, which I'm not sure what that'll be. But you know what? To me, is the kind of thing where like in 6 months or whatever, once they release a new little expansion, I'd be like, it was a quick enough game. I think I finished it. It didn't take me that long to finish. I don't know how long it took. I could look at my Steam time played, but I probably spent far more time fishing than I needed to. Yeah, I mean, it wasn't too much of a game that I feel like playing it a second time would tax me, and it would be interesting to play through it and pay more attention to the stuff that maybe I was kind of blazing through.
Sure,
right? Like that, like you don't know what's relevant until you finished it. And like, oh shit,
right.
You know. Yeah, I do recommend Dredge. I think it's a great game, unexpected kind of. Good game. Like you wouldn't think a game about fishing in a basically like weird New England town or whatever or set of islands would be interesting, but it really was. I think it was a great game. Things to explore, things to find. Like the idea of like, oh, you're constantly finding new fish and dealing with weird monsters of the sea. You know, like you do when you're a fisherman. And as a constant reminder, because the ocean is horrifying. Yeah, that was my Week in Geek. Dan, what about you?
I also played a video game. I've been playing off and on a game called Star Renegades. It's an indie game, much like Dredge. I've been playing it on my Nintendo Switch, but it is available, I believe, for every major platform, and except for Macintosh.
That's a pretty common thing.
Yeah,
Although, actually, I will say it's weird that I think there's, once again, Apple is pushing to change that. So you're seeing some stuff that's now getting, now that they've switched to the silicon chipset. But anyway.
Star Renegades is a role-playing game, like a team-based role-playing game roguelike. In that it is a run-based, team-based RPG. And the way they get away with sort of it being run-based is that they're dealing with, multiverse. So if you fail, if you die, it's okay. They just bring you into a new iteration of that universe that you're in. But it's a sci-fi tactical kind of role-playing game. Basically, there's an army of like cyborg things that are out to destroy all of, existence.
The world.
Which includes multiple dimensions and that kind of thing. And so you are tasked as being someone who's aware of it, to keep trying until it sticks. Right? What's interesting, I guess, is I think there's two things interesting about it that interest me the most. One, the retro stylings, despite being something that can never run on retro hardware. It's a pixel sprite based art style that are really complicated and gorgeous, right? So these big machines that are like have multiple moving parts and steam shooting out of them and stuff like that. But otherwise, it's presented, and with that in mind, I should say, it's presented like a kind of traditional sort of 16-bit RPG where you have your team on one side of the screen during battles, and then the enemies on the other side of the screen. And it's really based on kind of an active time battle system where you have the timeline at the top of the screen of when enemies are going to attack and when you are going to attack based on the options you choose for that turn. Mm-hmm. And there are turns that can manipulate people's speed and breaking people's space in the timeline. So you can kind of there's a strategic element to it where you can really maximize the opportunity you have per turn. But otherwise, kind of every character has a class and they have their own sort of move sets that go on. Aside from a basic attack, you have skills or magic or the equivalent of magic that use up points that that your level and stuff is earned. And between each battle, you earn experience points and you can level up your characters and equip new equipment, all that fun stuff, right? And the intriguing thing for me is, and this is kind of where I'm actually kind of divided on the game. I think it's very well written and it's a really beautiful game to look at. The pixel art is wonderful. And at least for like, I would say the first 7 or 8 hours, I was like really getting the loop, not only of just sort of going through each level. And I guess I should explain how each sort of scenario works because it's kind of unique. But I was actually feeling like even though I died, like my team would get wiped. Whenever we sort of started over, and you do start over from like level 1 for each character, and you have to build your team up again. I always felt like I was kind of taking another step forward, further into the game, further into the story. I'm like, okay, I'm seeing kind of how this all fits together. Until, like I do with many roguelike games, I hit a wall. I'm like, I'm I'm stuck in a time loop that's worse than Bill Murray in Groundhog Day. Like, this is never going to end. And that's kind of actually where I am right now with the game. I'm kind of like, I'm not as compelled to go back to it because I just feel like I'm going to hit the same walls again. Because being a roguelike, there's so much that's still kind of left to chance that I'm like, well, I can kind of tell 3 or 4 battles into it kind of how this run is going. And you can't just like reset. Or I think you might be able to, but that seems also defeating in its own way. The other interesting thing about it is there's like also a relationship mechanic with the team that you build. So the way that the levels are constructed is that there are discrete levels, and those are represented by kind of an overhead map with very specific paths you can take throughout the level. And along each path, you are dotted the different encounters. So you're not walking around freely through this map. You're just going from battle to battle to battle, and you have basically 3 turns to get through the map, and the turns are decided by the game, are called by the game days. Basically, each map has the boss coming to it in 3 days, and you have 3 days to get through as many of these battles as possible, making you as strong as possible, to be as prepared as possible for that boss. And throughout that overhead map, you can find equipment and do side missions even. But each day terminates after so many battles, and it's at that point where you can engage in this relationship mechanic. And you have this is where like a card mechanic comes in. As you are fighting, you get loot as well as cards. And they can be anything from like, you use these cards on other people, generally speaking. You can use some cards on yourself as well. But it's like, choose someone to give this like 10% armor piercing buff to for the next 3 battles. And not only will that give them that buff for the next 3 battles, but then you'll improve your relationship level with that character. And as you increase your relationship with the level with that character during that run, some things can unlock, meaning you hit level 1, you just get a across the board buff to like attack, percentage and stuff like that. Unlock level 2, you get like a Chrono Trigger style like tag team ability with that character, and so on and so forth. So there's what I like about it, and what does kind of keep me thinking about it and wanting to go back to it is the idea that there's a lot of different ways to approach your team and to hone them, so that you can make better decisions when you go up against that boss that you died on the previous run or something like that. Combined with fun writing and the cool sci-fi and pixel aesthetic, I've been really enjoying the experience. It was a game developed. It was released in 2020. It's a game developed by a company called Massive Damage,
right? Whose
previous game was Halcyon 6, if you're familiar. Yes, another kind of run-based sci-fi game, if I'm not mistaken. I didn't play too much of it.
I have it. I played it and I don't remember it. Not because it was bad, but because I realized when I try to remember it, I'm actually remembering a completely different game that was similar to it.
I think.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, it's clearly it's what they do. Mm-hmm. I think it seems to be their shtick. And honestly, the roguelike or roguelite is a popular genre, I think. You know, like, I mean, I always think of Hades being the one that really got a lot of attention.
The biggest mainstream, albeit indie one that dropped. Yeah, and And like we've talked about roguelikes before here, everything. I think the biggest one we both played off the top of my head was something like
Rogue Legacy
or Dead Cells, right?
Oh, okay.
That too, but Rogue Legacy 1 and 2.
I mean, I think we've talked about Rogue Legacy multiple times.
Probably, yeah. And the game was published by a company called Raw Fury. They did the Kingdom games. They did most recently Sable, which looked really interesting. Norco got a lot of coverage. It's like a point-and-click adventure game. Seemed really cool. Actually, they published a game that I had talked about before on this podcast, Call of the Sea, the sort of Lovecraftian adventure game, first-person adventure game. So, like, even though I'm kind of talking about how I feel like I'm kind of bouncing off the game a little bit, don't let that be a condemnation on the quality of the game. I have a limit when it comes to a lot of roguelikes, and I might just be hitting it. But as I'm talking about, I'm like, I should really go back to this game. You know, maybe just time away is what I needed. And I think the other thing that might be kind of holding me back is I am playing it on the Nintendo Switch. And I don't know if it's just I don't know how video games work. As far as I'm concerned, it's all magic under the hood. But I feel like when I first started playing it, it was working great. But now I'm like maybe 7 or 8 sort of quote unquote, generations. I've died that many times, maybe more. Mm-hmm. I feel like I'm getting slowed down playing it on the Switch, and I can't imagine it's because I'm on the 8th cycle of the game. There can't be that much information to remember. But considering you basically start from scratch at the beginning of each run, and I should say you do collect currency where at the beginning of each run you go to a hub and you can buy upgrades and equipment that becomes available during that run and whatnot. But like it's not enough to like bog down a game. I don't know. Maybe.
Well, and it's tough because I'm never sure with the Switch.
Right.
I mean, I know of all the systems out there, it is the least capable,
least powerful, yes.
In terms of the least powerful. And it wouldn't surprise me with games like that where they developed it for everything and then and then the Switch, right?
I would say it's probably, despite not having one, it's probably a good Steam Deck game. So if that's your bag, check it out. But I've been having...
Well, as it ends up, I've got a Steam Deck.
I've been playing... I play all my Switch stuff docked because I like being on my TV. And it looks great. And so if that sounds interesting to you, check it out. It's a lot of fun. I've been enjoying it quite a bit. So
yeah. No, I mean... It's,
no fishing as far as I can tell.
No fishing.
I'm sorry.
Well, that's you'll just have to wait till next time when I have to talk about Dave the Diver.
Dave the Diver.
And if who knows, by the time we get to that, maybe there'll be another fishing game out.
Dude, you can go down that rabbit hole, I'm sure, on Steam. And it's a deep, deep, deep dive.
Yeah, but I feel like it's going to be a lot of games no one really wants to play.
There's probably a porno fishing game on Steam.
You're probably not wrong. Yeah.
Well, there you go.
That's Steam for you.
Isn't it? So if you, dear listeners, have any thoughts about the topics we discussed this week, feel free to leave your thoughts as comments on the page for this episode at forallintents.net.
You can also post your comments or engage in conversations with other listeners on our Facebook page. Sorry, it was like, do we still have a Facebook page? All I know is apparently there's a class action lawsuit where I had to go look up my Facebook profile name, and I'm like, oh shit, I don't know what it is. So I can get sweet money from the law firm that sued Facebook.
I think I signed up for that as well.
I'm excited to get my $1.05.
What you can't get a $1.05 from is other social media, dear listeners, where you can also find us, specifically the ones that we frequent, which means you can find me on Instagram at dbethelcomics, which is also where you can find me on Threads, although I don't post too much there. And you can find Andrew on Mastodon at profounddark@dice.camp.
While you're at our website at forallintents.net, you can also follow the link in the corner to our YouTube page where you'll see exciting content, specifically this show simulcast in YouTube. If you do listen to us on YouTube or you happen to go there, please feel free to like and subscribe, or as the kids like to say, ring that bell.
We use 2 tracks of music for our show. One's called Disco Medusi, the other's called District 4. Both written and performed by Kevin MacLeod of the Clan MacLeod, immortal swordsman, graph paper enthusiast, and musician extraordinaire.
You can find his music at incompetech.filmmusic.io, and that's all licensed under the Creative Commons 4.0 attribution license.
If you like the show and like to help us out, the best way to do so would be to subscribe to the show using whichever podcasting service you happen to use. What would help us out even more, though, would be to leave some sort of review. Whether a text review or using the proprietary metric helps spread the word to new potential listeners through the magic of algorithms. Now, I know we've taken a week off, but I feel like it's happening more now than ever, we should address a recent loss in the entertainment community. One Paul Reubens passed away on July 30th. Pee Wee Herman himself. It sucks, because he's nothing but joy.
Sometimes a little bit too much joy.
Hey, man. He was doing what people do at the place where people do that back in the day before the internet. You can't fault a person for that. His problem was he was famous.
The big shock for me was the realization that, he died of cancer at age 70. I'm like, age 70? And in my brain, it's like, no, he's not that old. And then as I start to really think about it, I'm like, oh, no, actually, now that I think about it, he's probably about, 25 to 30 years older than me.
Right.
Oh, shit.
Yeah. I also, since he was in character as Pee Wee so much, I'm like, I don't think I ever registered him as having an age. It's like, he was a cartoon character.
Right. Yeah, I mean, that's, a character that didn't really have an age. It was Pee Wee.
Right.
So, you don't really think about it, and then you're like, oh, wow, okay, so he's 70, or he was.
He was, indeed. I think the other shocking thing, I shared this with our group chat.
Oh, you did?
Was, he went to CalArts, which is the art school owned by Disney, I believe. I think is it as shocking or more shocking than realizing that Robin Williams and Christopher Reeves were roommates at Juilliard, I believe. But no, at CalArts, Paul Reubens was roommates with none other than the Hoff himself.
Right. David Hasselhoff, which I think the big shock was like, oh, David Hasselhoff went to CalArts?
Right. For Baywatch? This was you got a degree in this? No.
in night riderology?
Oh, heck yeah. Well, never mind. I take back all my snarky humor. That is academic quality entertainment.
It was just, it's that weird thing where you're like, oh, okay, not what I expected. Yeah.
Yeah. So,
and apparently, David Hasselhoff tweeted about it and was very, it was that weird thing where they weren't just they didn't just know each other. They were roommates and they were friends.
Yeah.
And you're like, it's that weird thing of him being like, yeah, I'm really sad that this guy who's a friend is passed. And you're like, oh yeah, it's just weird. You don't think about that.
Yeah. Rest in peace, Paul Reubens. Gone too soon. Cancer sucks. Left us with a lot of really fun, interesting, weird ass entertainment. Pee Wee's Playhouse, big staple of my youth. And I think unlike with a lot of, especially cartoons that fueled my youth, things like Transformers, G.I. Joe, etc., where if you go back to them now, it's mostly nostalgia that fuels the thought that they're good. I think if you go back and watch Pee Wee's Playhouse, it's probably gotten better with age, just due to the inherent subversive nature of Pee Wee's humor and the history of that character, honestly. And also, of course, launched the career. Absolutely couldn't have happened without. Launched the career.
No doubt, no question. Launched the
career of Larry Fishburne.
Larry Fishburne.
And of course, Asa Patha Murkison as well, of Law and Order fame.
I think there's an unusual number of people that were that guest starred in Pee Wee's Playhouse.
Yeah.
Larry Fishburne is Cowboy Curtis. Yeah.
So until you get your career launched on Pee Wee's Playhouse, dear listeners, I'm D. Bethel.
And I'm Andrew Asplund.
And for all intents and purposes,
that was a podcast.
I injured myself tonight. I have to keep my leg elevated, so for the first time in a while, I'm sitting down for the recording. Just carved off the back of my heel on the baseboard because I am uncoordinated at times. moving forward. Okay, so that's not exciting. I'm getting that from you.
No, I just. Let's do it.
What are we?
Clap.
What are we doing?
I don't know. I haven't done anything.
Oh, you could talk about the plunge. What's it called? Deep plunge, purge, dredge.
Oh, did I not talk about?
You have not talked about dredge. What'd you get? I'm kind of interested now.
I'll do an episode. No.
My week in geek is interesting this week, Dan.
Did we clap? Are we clapping?
Sure. After one, motherfucker. 3 and 2 and 3 and 2 and 1 and